Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of A Photographic Life. And something new this week, something that I hope we're going to continue as a monthly regular throughout the coming year. Valentin Louis-Georges Eugène Marcel Proust was born in 1871. He was a French novelist, literary critic and essayist, best known for his novel translated in English as Remembrance of Things Past or In Search of Lost Time, which was published in 7 volumes between 1913 and 1927. The novel consists of approximately 1.25 million words and explores themes of memory, art, love, high society, and the human experience through the narrator's, recollections, and deals with themes such as desire, artistic creativity, sexuality, and class. Proust died of pneumonia and pulmonary problems in 1922, aged 51, and was buried in the Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris, as is Jim Morrison of The Doors. Proust's reflections on memory seem particularly relevant to me when seeing photography as a recording of memory that becomes history. The Proust Questionnaire is a set of questions answered by the French writer, and in a confession album, a form of parlour game popular at the end of the 1890s. The album, titled An Album to Record Thoughts, Feelings, etc., belonged to his friend Antoinette, the daughter of future French President Félix Faure. The album was found in 1924 by Faure's son and published in the French literary journal Les Cahiers du Mois. Our Proust Questionnaire is a Proust Photo Quiz, and it's an adaptation of the original text, and our first photographer to attempt it is friend of the podcast, Harry Borden. So, Harry, welcome to the Proustian Photo Life Quiz Questionnaire. Shall we get started?
Yeah, I'm honoured to take part.
Well, let's see how you feel at the end of it. First question. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
And my mind immediately goes to my children. And without wishing to sound like a born-again Christian, I'm not a religious person, but for me, in a sort of Darwinian sense, there really isn't anything else. I didn't start out thinking that. You know, through my 20s, I was more in pursuit of hedonistic pleasures. But then my life changed when I had my daughter and then subsequent sons. And so for me, the idea, I feel very content, and there's definitely a happiness arc, you know, or a curve. You know, I definitely was a bit more disgruntled in my 30s and have reached a more of a equilibrium in terms of my mental state. And I think that's in part due to the knowledge that I have good relationships with my children. I genuinely feel connected and part of their lives. And it sort of broadens everything and gives me a sense of perspective. I think that relationship is kind of key. So it's unlike most relationships, which consist of a kind of often a kind of you're collaborating in a very push and pull way. With children, it's just one-way traffic. You sort of love them unconditionally and you give them everything, and then if you're lucky, you might get something back. But a good parent really never expects anything and never places that burden on them. And to have them sort of come back into my life, you know, in my autumn years is very, very satisfying and actually my idea of perfect happiness.
So perfect happiness is being a father.
Yeah, being a parent, sort of feeling connected with the world. I remember when the moment that Jane, my ex, sort of told me that she was pregnant. You know, it was something that I'd been brought up to fear. The worst possible kind of scenario as a young man, getting a girl pregnant, if I'm honest. But when it happened when Jane told me, I was driving up the M3 into London. I was going through sort of a load of pine trees, and I suddenly realised that if I was to veer off the road and down into a siding and crash the car and die, a part of me was living on. And that sounds kind of egotistical, because Polly, my daughter, is a person in her own right and so on, and actually not a part of me really at all. But it changed the whole relationship I have with the world. And specifically, I remember another occasion I was sort of in Hackney driving, and I saw a load of kids crossing a pedestrian crossing, and I sort of felt a paternalistic sense of concern for their well-being, and because I could relate them to my children. So I think it changes everything. So, for instance, we're sort of conditioned as men, perhaps, and this isn't politically correct to point out, to be very kind of on the lookout for attractive women. And I think if you have a daughter who is sort of a young, my daughter's sort of 29, then I don't kind of have inappropriate kind of thoughts to the same extent as I might would, because it's sort of it's a buffer, and it's a sort of guardrail. It sort of establishes your place in society. And I think it's enriched my life. And I don't want to sound complacent or in any way smug about it, but it's just my observation that they've changed me, and in a really profoundly good way. They've made me a better person, as far as I can see.
Okay, so what is your greatest fear?
My greatest fear? Well, actually, and it's just going to be one big kind of soliloquy about my children, but that I can easily say that my greatest fear is them coming to harm, and it sort of rises in kind of ferocity and concern when I sort of go down from there. So Polly's 30 or coming up to 30, and then my youngest, Florian, he's just turned 15. So he's the one I'm concerned about at the most, because he's the most vulnerable. But I don't fear death. I'm not really concerned about status or material things as much as I probably was in my younger years. But my greatest fear is something happening to Florian, and then also Oscar, Fred, and Polly.
Okay. So what is the trait that you most deplore in yourself?
Well, deplore is quite a sort of pejorative term. There are lots of traits that I sort of objectively, because I try to be more self-aware, am aware of, sort of competitiveness. A lot of the things that I kind of don't like about myself can be mitigated by having a more of an awareness of my physical state. So I know that I'm not great when I'm hungry or in a state of exhaustion. I would say I always try and hold on to humour in the absurdity of life. I think it's important to kind of retain a sense of humour, and so at moments where I lose that sense of humour and I take myself too seriously, then I'm in trouble. I mean, I remember when I was photographing, I know this is getting onto the photography side of things, but Billie Piper, and it was back when she was about 15, and I was shooting her for this magazine. And the stylist came along and had a big ego, and basically decided that, well, quite rightly, because that's how magazines are funded, that she would pick the clothes that Billie would wear in order to reflect the companies that had advertised with the magazine. And I sort of felt this wasn't a fashion shoot, and I wanted to get a definitive portrait of Billie Piper. And I remember it started kind of in a small, rancorous way, sort of us sniping at each other. And it ended with a huge entourage that Billie Piper had there, and the art director and the picture editor and my assistants. We were all in this big echoey studio. And it ended with me saying, well, ultimately, it's my decision, and a photographer is higher up the food chain than a stylist. And I said it, and it went quiet as I said it. And looking back, that was just a completely nasty thing to do, and it was humorless as well. There would have been better ways that I could have handled that. In fact, that would make a good story for our YouTube channel. But basically, I think when I sort of lose that facility to laugh and at the absurdity and not take things seriously, I think the people I admire have a sort of lightness of touch,
Well,
and I think humor.
hang on, Harry, because those are questions coming up. You cannot
Okay.
play with the format of
Okay.
the questionnaire, as I probably am going to have to find out as we progress. So, what is the trait that you most deplore in others?
Well, yes, I would say probably, yeah, being the sort of vainglorious way, the kind of small-minded kind of egotism of people. You know, maybe Donald Trump a little bit. I mean, but although he does have a sort of sense of humor, which I think he manages to kind of get away with a lot because you can't deny that he does have a good sense of humor, and people who are kind of pious and condemnatory of him, quite rightly so, often don't allow for that. The fact that humor sort of it's a great tool. So I would say, in answer to that question, cruelty, sort of. We clearly live in a hierarchy. There is a sort of, all people aren't created equal. You know, I'm not a communist, but I do think everybody deserves to be treated with respect, and people often have wonderful talents that are hidden and need to be kind of cultivated and nurtured and brought to the fore. And that doesn't happen if the people who are kind of higher in the hierarchy are aggressive, bullying, and try to entrench the current sort of relative pecking order. I think it's better to sort of cultivate a situation where people are allowed to flourish. And that's what I've always done with my photography. All my assistants are still my friends, and they're all doing really well as photographers, and I'm really proud to see that happen. And I see other people, maybe not in the industry we're in, but in other fields, they try and entrench the current status quo by, say for instance, sending your child to a private school. It's a way of kind of gaming the system and reinforcing the way things are. And I think that there should be a kind of fluidity. But in answer to in a simple way, I just say what I really don't like to see is bullying and aggressive behaviour, which I exhibited to the stylist on the Billy Piper shoot.
So, which living person do you most admire?
Oh, that's a difficult one. If you're going to narrow it down to one, it's so tricky. I've got to just say this off the top of my head. I mean, the people that follow me, they're going to be familiar with the questions, and they're going to have time to ponder, aren't they? Like Desert Island Discs. Like supposedly, David Cameron got help, with his choice of the 10 discs, because how it would play with the audience. I'm sort of biding for time. I mean, I always, when people say who would I like to photograph, I do. I don't really admire him, but I do admire his chutzpah. I was going to say Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm, but I don't really admire him. I kind of admire, right now, it's a constantly changing thing, isn't it? I quite like a guy called Nathan Fielder, and there's a program that's, it's not a hugely mainstream program, but it was a big success in the noughties. And it's called something like Nathan Helps You or something like that. And he was also the guy that discovered John. There's a guy who filmed on the streets of New York, and he did a whole series of wonderful pieces of art, really, but ended up being hugely successful. So this guy, Nathan Fielder, I would say I really admire him because of the creative output, and also key is the humor. And I do think in the best pictures I've taken, quite often there's a little element of humor there. You get a sense of my humor from some of the pictures. I just think it's so, in a philosophical sense, when we're kind of confronted by the absurdity of the world and the impossibility of, the universe going on forever and these big questions, the only kind of logical response is one of throwing your hands up and just laughing at the absurdity of it all.
Okay, so next question. What is your greatest extravagance?
Well, this is going to be very telling about the type of person I am. So I am aware that I do have a streak of Puritanism. So I have really, as I've got older, become aware through. There's a friend of mine, the writer William Leith. He wrote a book called "Bits of Me Are Falling Apart: Dark Thoughts from the Middle Years." And the takeaway from this book is that really, once you've had children, once you've entered middle-aged, all bets are off. In a Darwinian sense, you've performed your function. And so to that end, whilst I used to smoke, take drugs, I did have mushrooms actually, but it was quite relatively recently, and it was kind of a very spiritual experience because I didn't actually, it wasn't combined with lots of other drugs, so it was a kind of very intentional experience. But on the whole, I would say my extravagances are really kind of irritatingly good. So, for instance, I really enjoy swimming. So I will just, if I'm sort of feeling a bit discombobulated, I will take myself off to the swimming pool and do 30 lengths and then have a little steam and a sauna afterwards. That's my extravagance and also I'm aware that, I love my life. I love being alive. I think it's sort of, it's disturbing, with all this kind of modern technology and everything, but I'm still hanging on in there. And in order to do that, I have to make good choices. And so I have abandoned, although I really did used to love it, smoking. And but I, on a regular basis, every morning I will have a properly made cup of coffee, and I will take my dog for a walk, and I will sort of, I'm quite virtuous in that respect. So in answer to your question, I would say my greatest extravagance, did you say?
Yes, Harry.
I would say my greatest extravagance is it's pretty boring. I would probably, you wouldn't even regard it as an extravagance. I don't really do extravagance. I get up and it's a Protestant work ethic. I get up and I, as David Hockney said, I get up and I go to work.
Right. So which words of...
Which one? Okay, I'm going to say...
No, which words, next question, we're moving on. Which words or phrases do you most overuse?
Basically, as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, come on, you can do better than that. So I'll just say...
particularly annoying because my youngest daughter says basically about everything.
Yeah, it's just another way of saying at the end of the day, it's also kind of. I say kind of, but basically and kind of.
Okay. And which talent would you most like to have?
Oh, I think probably I was learning to play the piano, and then my mum died at the beginning of last year, and I found that I was going to my piano teacher, who's quite severe and, doesn't really think it's funny if I've not really made any progress. So instead of going every week, it went to every 2 weeks, and I still wasn't making any progress because I wasn't in the right state of mind to practice. And when I do practice, I have this penchant for listening to Newsnight at the same time. So I'm playing piano between 10:30 and 11 whilst listening to Newsnight, which isn't good. I mean, he thought that was completely ridiculous. But I got to grade 3, and I was making progress, but not at a rate that I'm accustomed to, because I'm normally quite a quick learner. I've got a good mind, I think. I'm blessed in that regard, apart from having some dyslexia and possibly ADHD. I basically have a good mind. And so it's actually been quite a good process, because it's taught me some perseverance and stuff. So it is something I'd love to be able to do extremely well. And it floors me when I see musicians who can just express themselves so lightly and emotionally. For me, it's like a mechanical machine, and I'm getting there, and I was making progress, but I'm in a sort of hiatus, and I'm going to go back to it.
I think a lot of photographers either were musicians or would like to be musicians. I think there's a real sort of synchronicity there.
There was definitely that was definitely the case at the NME, I think, and actually gave me an advantage because I was never that in awe of the musicians. For me, I'm quite snobby about it. Actually, I have a Sonos speaker which wakes me up every morning, and it's set since the pandemic. It's been set to Radio 3, so I'd rather the sophisticated, more complex music that you find on Radio 3 than the stuff that was being the bands I was photographing, like the Happy Mondays or whatever, in the 80s when I started at the NME, or maybe the beginning of the 90s. It was 1989 was my first commission for the NME. So I was quite snobby, so I wasn't really in awe of them, and I think that meant that I wasn't in thrall, and it didn't actually affect the interaction. So I was sort of very first and foremost a photographer, and I was bringing them into my world rather than me being kind of allowed to be, if I'm lucky, the fifth member of the band kind of thing.
If you were to die and come back as a person or a thing, what would it be?
Well, I think it'd be wonderful to come back. I was going to say my dog Marco, because I do adore him, and he brings such colour to our lives, really. But actually, it's kind of, a dog is a kind of a supplement. It basically is a pack animal, and I don't think that sort of plays to who I am, really. So I would say a dolphin, because it would be so radically different. And dolphins are playful, enigmatic, and I think it would be.
And they swim a lot.
And they do swim, so there's that element too.
Yeah. Okay. And do you like fish?
Yeah, I love fish.
Okay, it's not one of the questions, but I just thought I'd check before you come back.
No, my son is constantly complaining because I love cooking, and I lately I've been making a lot of fish curries, and he doesn't like them.
Okay. So, where would you most like to live?
This is something that I think about a lot, because you get to a point where I don't think all the boxes can ever be ticked, because when I'm sort of, I went down to the other side of Plymouth, just over the Tamar Bridge, and there's Kingsand down there. There's a little community that gets driven past as people drive down to Cornwall. And I thought, oh, how wonderful. And I thought, well, maybe I should move down here. And then I got up to London, and I think I love the energy. And then I think, wow, I'd like to live in the Barbican. One of my Holocaust survivors that I photographed in my book, he lived in the Barbican. He had a double height ceiling, and what a cultured, wonderful life you could lead. And then, I like the idea of swimming every day. So I do going back to the seaside resort. I was down in Sidmouth. My son was in a rugby match, and so I drive around, and I'm constantly looking for places. But as long as I'm around the people that I care for, and my basic needs are met, in a Maslow's hierarchy of needs way, I think I'm quite happy where I am. Really, I have really good light here. See, I'm lit through a skylight. It's coming through the ceiling here. Where I'm living is on a south facing, and it slopes gently down to the Grand Western Canal. And the field in front of my house I own, and I let the farmer put some sheep on it. And the main thing is light. It has fantastic light, and it isn't ever likely to be flooded as well, which is something that I'm sort of maybe in the past irrationally afraid of, but in the present perhaps sensibly aware of. So where I am is fine, but and I do like the UK. I don't kind of really like the way that we're heading, politically at the moment. But I mean, I still think it's a wonderful place. and I feel very privileged to have been lucky enough to been spent most of my life here.
Okay, so talk of flooding takes me very nicely on to my next question, which is, what is your most treasured possession?
I'd say probably my most treasured possession. I think probably there are things that I bought. I'm a big car boot sale sort of aficionado. And when you go to car boot sales and you go on Facebook Marketplace like I do, and you go into charity, you can't pass a charity shop. One thing you become acutely aware of, especially also when you have a parent die and you have to sort of liquidate their estate, is you realize that most things don't have any value. So I would probably have to be boring and say my negatives, particularly the photographs of my children. I mean, so it's so weird. I found a old copy of the British Journal of Photography, and as a photograph, I was testing a camera for the British Journal of Photography, a APX. I think it was a redundant film format that was sort of a sort of proto-digital combination. And it was an Olympus camera, and I took some pictures, and I happened to take a selfie of me with Robin Williams. And I've become quite obsessed with finding those original digital files, because actually I had no idea that I might have a YouTube channel, and it could be quite good to have this shoot has now 25 years later been used, on a biography of Robin Williams, and has become quite definitive. But at the time, you don't realize what you're doing has the potential to last. And so those sorts of personal pictures are really, really precious to me. I mean, that's probably an answer that you're going to get from a lot of photographers. I could say, my grandfather's Omega, but this is illustrative of the fact that my grandfather was an admiral in the Navy, and his father-in-law was an admiral also. So quite, a man of some repute. And I inherited his Omega watch, but I gave it to Florian, and in fact he was asking me to wind it up and set it in the right time this morning. So I don't put great store in material things, but I do appreciate good engineering and something that's beautifully designed and so on.
It's an interesting revelation that your family goes back to the sea and you wish to come back as a dolphin. I will leave that thought process there. I've got a feeling that the questionnaire is doing its job. Okay, so what is your most marked characteristic?
I think if you asked people, I am quite a competitive person. And I think that was born out of, it was something innate, but then it kind of grew in the kind of soil of my childhood, and having a father that was very, very competitive and who didn't really like me much. Didn't really want to be a father, and so my brother and sister and I were kind of competing for attention in a family dynamic that was characterized by scarcity. And so I do think that's something I've begun to realize. But I think that's probably, at my wedding, I remember people were sort of talking about, speeches, and it kept coming up that I was really competitive. It was like the joke and so on. And so people say it, but I don't feel it myself, but I do, sort of, without wishing to sound kind of absurd, in an Alan Partridgian way, play to win. If I sort of commit to something, I'm not afraid of looking foolish. We've all played badminton, me and my sons, and I always think you can commit and you might completely miss it and look like an idiot. I'm all in, or if I play football or whatever, I'm all in. We play five-a-side. We hire the sports centre. I was for most of the people that we were playing with, I was 3 times their age, because they were Florian's friends, and then the rest of them I was twice their age. There was no one else of my age, and I managed to acquit myself okay. And one of Fred's friends did his cruciate knee ligament, so he's in crutches now. So I am competitive, but I would say over the years I've become more sanguine, and I would like to think that I'm sort of playful stroke antagonistic as a quality. So I can be quite annoying what's the name was it Socrates? Sort of I like to sort of interrogate things. I don't like received wisdom. I don't like people thinking because I'm sort of a certain type of person that I have all these types of views. I like to sort of interrogate things, and sometimes I do that in quite a provocative way. So, for instance, Fred quite often has to edit my observations out of the videos for fear of me getting cancelled or whatever. That makes it sound really bad or whatever. But I just don't like. I don't like being part of the consensus. It's the same with the world of photography. I can't stand it. That everybody is has to have the same politics and the same worldview. It really irritates me.
I stick with George Orwell, who said that liberty is the freedom to say things that other people don't like.
Exactly.
I think that will stick with me. So we're moving on. We're finding out a lot about you, Harry.
Incidentally,
Yeah.
I loved I just saw Craig Easton's pictures of George Orwell on that island where he stayed before he died. And I think I haven't seen it, but Fiona should cover that on your podcast because it looks like a really interesting exhibition.
Okay, well, Craig's a friend of the podcast, so let's see. Maybe he'll take the questionnaire. Okay, yeah. So what do you most value in your friends?
The immediate word loyalty comes up, but that's pathetic, isn't it? You don't want people you actually want people that provoke you. And my best friend died at 52 of esophageal cancer, and before he died, it was the time of when Trump was looming into view and Brexit was happening. And we would meet in Taunton and we'd have a coffee and we'd play snooker. And he basically we would argue constantly, but it was always trying to kind of score points, but we never lost our temper about things like that. So it's not really loyalty. I think what it is it's really simple. This is what I say to my kids and or anyone that will listen, that I think you are the sum total of your 5 best friends. And one of my best friends is Marco, my dog, and he's certainly loyal, although not that loyal, because when he's sort of on a beach or whatever and you're calling him, he'll just look behind you over his shoulder and then carry on going if the alternative is enticing for him. But basically, I think you're the sum total of these 5 best friends, and so you have to really choose wisely. And in answer to the question, I like people. What I've learned over the course of the decades that I've lived is that you should really prioritize people that get you, that really like your peccadillos, are genuinely not competitive relationships. So my friend who lives in Australia, he bought a Mercedes that belonged to Ayrton Senna. He bought it in the 90s and he sold it at Sotheby's, and he's like one of my best friends, and we unfortunately our friendship has sort of had to be mostly digital, sort of sending each other messages. And he came over and it sold for £200,000 at Sotheby's just a couple of weeks ago, and nobody could have been more happy than me, because that's a friendship. Because if you really love someone, you want them to be happy. And it's not a zero-sum game. I'm not in competition with him. And so I think what you really want in a friend is someone who really gets you and celebrates all the things that other people might find irritating. Just accepts them, because that's what makes you you. You're not going to like everyone, but there's no point in sort of chasing after people who are mean to you. And in the past, I've sort of done that, I think, because that mirrors the relationship I had with my parents. And you unwittingly, in attachment theory, you mirror those early relationships if you're not careful. And I become more mindful and aware of that now. So, I would say, in answer to the question, someone that gets you.
Well,
accepts you.
let's see if this person would get you. Which historical figure do you most identify with?
Mm. So tricky. I don't know. Um, the thing is that I think history is sort of, as you talk about, it really is kind of a narrative that has been created over time. I mean, I read Helen Lewis's book recently, The Genius Myth, and you realize that the notion of the genius is a sort of political construct, and these stories of people who are kind of admirable and special and geniuses, they're just stories, and they don't really reflect who they are. So I know you're probably not going to want me to duck that question.
No, Harry, I
And
don't want you to duck that question because I think it's a particularly revealing question.
yeah, so really you're asking me whose story do I most identify with?
If you wish to rephrase the question, you're by all means welcome
Yeah.
to do so.
Well, I'm going to go for Jesus then,
Well, don't
because
don't go too high.
well, I'm not a religious person.
Don't be too competitive.
What I like about Jesus, as opposed to some of the main central protagonists in other big religions, is that what he was proposing was really quite radical, and he at the time was completely it was freakish behavior. The idea of turning the other cheek. Basically, I photographed Matthew Modine in the 90s, and he produced a film for which he asked if he could use the portrait of that I'd taken of him for the movie poster, which I did, which was and it was nice to be involved with it. But the film was called Jesus is a Communist, and Jesus was a proto-communist, really. His thoughts about materialism, and it's easier for a rich man to go into the kingdom of God, and likening that to the likelihood of a camel passing through the eye of a needle. I wouldn't say, obviously, that I'm sort of going to be remembered in 2,000 years or anything like that, but I admire people that actually think for themselves. But I would caveat that with this is just our understanding of Jesus, but the story remains really compelling, doesn't it?
I'm going to leave you with that. It was not the answer I was expecting, and that's great. So, what is your greatest regret?
Mm, my greatest regret. Um,
It could be
you know,
professional or it could be personal. I'm not going to push you either way.
yeah, I mean, I don't tend to be inclined to indulge in regrets. I could be really banal and facetious and sort of say, I should have held on to, I didn't need to sell it, but I should have held on to my house in Hackney in Victoria Park. But that would be pathetic. And I don't really regret it because, because I bought a flat in Paddington where Fred lives. So, you can't predict the future. You can't, even me. Come my marriage derailing in 2009, I have no regrets because on paper, at the time, it seemed like the wheels had completely come off, but I learnt so much. And I do think catastrophe is a huge opportunity. And I don't want to sound glib or minimize people that are going through tough stuff, but I really do embrace the Nietzschean what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You need to kind of develop resilience, and that only happens when bad things happen, or bad things in quotation marks. So, do I regret anything? I mean, I could have. In my terms of my career, Jeff Katz, who died relatively recently, at one point was suggesting that I move to New York. And my life could have been completely different. I could have been doing posters for movies and stuff. But, that kind of put me in competition with Nigel Parry. And I think probably that idea wasn't really feasible anyway. But I could have moved to America. I've got an American passport. But as I said in earlier answer, I do like the UK. I like living over here. And it's a kind of, you know, I don't think I just think that I can't even think of one thing that I regret off the top of my head. I mean, I tell you what, you've got to have an answer. I regret not going and seeing the Smiths in when they were around in the 80s, because I love the Smiths.
I hate to tell you, but I saw them at the ICA, and I also saw them when they played County Hall for a live event.
Wow.
So I saw them twice.
Were they
so
good?
There you go. No, not particularly. Anyway, final question.
Final question.
What is your motto?
Well, it's kind of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I'd say. I love that. And I found that to be true. And it's so optimistic as well. But I'll go back. What my motto will be, I don't know who it was. It might have been you who told me this. There was an interview with David Hockney, and he was asked about when he was going to retire. And he just scoffed, and he said, every day I get up and I go to work. And it's really simple. I think the key to being successful in anything is actually getting enthused and sticking at it. 95% of being successful is turning up. So I was saying this yesterday to my son. I was saying to my sister, who's living with me at the moment, because she was living with my mum. And it's been really lovely actually connecting with her. But I've spent a lot of time during the day sort of getting back to the old family dynamic of when we were children, and which has been lovely but unsatisfactory, because I think my motto is that I feel every day that I have to, and it just sounds really conceited and so on, but I do feel I have to achieve something. I have to sort of feel I've done something that day, and that isn't sort of sitting around talking about our mum or dad or family or whatever. It's sort of doing the work, and I would actually regard this as doing the work, because it's sort of, I'm doing this completely off the cuff, and I haven't prepared any answers, and
I haven't given you any of the questions.
but I can see how as I'm sort of pontificating, I'm sort of thinking, and that might inform something that will drop into my head as I'm doing lengths later on, and I come up with an idea for some project or whatever. So yeah, go to work would be my motto.
So Harry Borden, future dolphin, connector with Jesus, family man. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And thank you very much to you also for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. I think for me, it's a really interesting way of getting to the heart of what photography and what photographers, how they see photography, without the need to talk about work, cameras, and all that other stuff. Intrinsically, we are who we are, and we are photographers because of who we are. I hope you now feel that you get a slightly deeper sense about Harry. There'll be more photographers taking the quiz in coming months. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, I look forward to your feedback. And of course, I hope you'll always take care.